A millionaire suspects the poor nanny and installs hidden cameras and is shocked by what he sees. Emily Carter stood in front of the tall black iron gate, clutching tightly the worn cloth bag with frayed straps. Her heart was beating faster than usual. Before her stood the Anderson Mansion, a massive structure set apart from the noisy streets, a place that made anyone feel at just one glance that they did not belong. She was only 23 years old. Her dark brown hair was neatly tied into a bun at the nape of her neck, her simple dress washed until its color had faded. Emily knew exactly how she looked standing before a place like this. Small, out of place, and easy to overlook. But she still took a deep breath and told herself, "I'm here to take care of a child." The gate slowly opened. A vast garden stretched out before her, the grass perfectly trimmed, a fountain murmuring softly, like something out of a movie. Everything was beautiful, coldly so. The front door swung open. A woman stepped out, tall and slender, her blonde hair smooth and flawless, not a strand out of place. Sophia Anderson. Her gaze swept over Emily quickly, sharp and appraising. "You're the new nanny?" "Yes, I'm Emily." Sophia nodded, without smiling. "I don't like wasting time, so I'll be direct. There are rules here. They must be followed absolutely." Emily listened in silence as Sophia listed each one in a flat, mechanical tone, like reading from a rule book. No noise, no snacks, no excessive affection, no personal questions, and above all, no questioning her way of raising her child. "Leo is a child who needs discipline," Sophia concluded. "You just need to do your job." Emily nodded, but inside, something tightened quietly. She was led up the staircase. The second floor. A long hallway, eerily quiet. When Sophia pointed to the third door on the right and walked away, Emily paused for a few seconds before knocking. There was no answer. Emily gently opened the door. And in that very moment, her heart sank. In the middle of the large room, filled with toys still sealed in their boxes, a tiny boy sat with his back turned, motionless, on a chair placed against the wall. There was no laughter, no movement, only a child, sitting in a silence that was frightening. Emily stood frozen at the doorway, her heart feeling as if it were being tightly squeezed. The small boy sitting on the chair against the wall looked far too little for such a vast room. His back was perfectly straight, his hands neatly placed on his thighs, completely still, not turning around, as if even the slightest movement would be a serious mistake. "Hello?" Emily spoke very softly, afraid that her voice might shatter the terrifying silence. The boy flinched slightly. Very slowly, as if programmed, he turned his head. His eyes were large, dark, deep, and filled with fear. "Hello, ma'am?" His voice was so quiet it almost dissolved into the air. Emily stepped closer and knelt down to meet his gaze. "I'm Emily. I'm here to take care of you. Your name is Leo, right?" The boy nodded very lightly. "Why are you sitting here?" Emily asked, trying to keep her voice calm. Leo lowered his head. "Because I did something wrong." "What did you do?" A long silence followed. Then Leo whispered, as if ashamed, "I spilled orange juice on the dining table." Emily froze. "That's all?" Leo nodded. "Yes." Emily glanced at the clock on the wall. Nearly 8 in the morning. She swallowed hard. "How long have you been sitting here?" "Since breakfast." "What time was breakfast?" 6 o'clock. Emily felt her chest tighten. More than 2 hours. A 4-year-old child sitting completely still just because. He spilled juice. "Can you stand up?" she asked softly. Leo immediately shook his head, panic filling his eyes. "No, Mommy Sophia said, I have to sit until noon." "Until noon?" Emily could hardly believe her ears. "Yes." "I deserve it," Leo said, his voice flat, as if repeating a sentence he had memorized. The words pierced Emily's chest. I deserve it. A 4-year-old who had already learned how to condemn himself. Emily took a deep breath, trying to restrain her emotions. Leo, are you hungry? The boy hesitated, then nodded slightly. Yes, but I'm not allowed to eat more. Are you thirsty? Yes, but Mommy said naughty children aren't allowed to drink water. Emily turned her face away for a moment, afraid that if she kept looking, she would burst into tears. She turned back, resting her hands lightly on her knees, her voice trembling. Are you scared? Leo looked up at her, then glanced around the room, as if afraid someone might be listening. Finally, he whispered, Yes, I'm afraid of making Mommy angry. Where is your dad? Emily asked. He's on a business trip. He only comes home on weekends. Emily understood. Alone, a 4-year-old child in this enormous house, with cold rules and endless punishments. Do you like being hugged? Emily asked very softly. Leo looked confused. Hugged? What does that mean? Emily bit her lip. She realized that standing before her was not just a child who was too obedient, but a child who had never been allowed to be a child at all. And in that moment, Emily understood that, from this moment on, she would no longer be able to remain just a nanny who followed the rules. Emily quickly realized that in this mansion, Sophia Anderson had two completely different faces. When outsiders were present, especially when Daniel, her husband, was at home, Sophia always appeared as the image of a model mother, speaking softly, straightening Leo's clothes in front of her husband, occasionally placing a hand on the boy's shoulder as a carefully calculated gesture of care. But when the doors closed, when only Leo and the household staff remained, Sophia became a different person. Her voice turned cold, her eyes lost their false gentleness and were replaced by a level of control that was chilling. Leo, stand up straight. Leo, don't look around. Leo, be quiet. Every movement the boy made was scrutinized, measured, and ready to be labeled a mistake. Emily witnessed Sophia controlling every one of Leo's meals. Breakfast consisted of only a slice of dry bread, no butter, no milk, no fruit. When Leo quietly asked, "May I have some more water?" Sophia merely glanced at him with a sharp, icy look. No, children who drink too much water develop demanding habits. Lunch was no better. Leo's portions were always smaller than those of any child his age. When Emily cautiously spoke up, "Maybe Leo needs to eat a little more, he's growing," Sophia immediately cut her off. "Children who eat too much become lazy. I'm not raising a weak child." But what frightened Emily the most was not the lack of food. It was the punishments, applied as a daily routine. Spilling a drop of water, dropping a spoon on the floor, running faster than allowed, asking too many questions, crying. All of it led to the same outcome, the punishment chair. The wooden chair placed against the wall in Leo's room, where he had to sit perfectly still, unable to move or speak, sometimes for hours. Sophia called it reflection time. "He has to understand consequences," she said casually, as if talking about the weather. Emily often found Leo sitting on the chair, his eyes red but daring not to cry out loud. The boy learned that crying, too, was a mistake. The cruelest part was the way Sophia distorted the concept of love in the child's mind. People only love good children. You're being punished because you're not good. If you don't want Mommy to be angry, then don't do anything wrong. Gradually, Leo stopped asking, "Why am I being punished?" He only asked, "How long will I be punished?" Emily saw Leo grow quieter day by day. He avoided eye contact. When spoken to, he always answered briefly. When he walked, his steps were light, as if afraid of disturbing the air around him. Worse still, he began to control his emotions in a terrifying way. When he was in pain, he bit his lip and endured it. When he was sad, he lowered his head in silence. When he was afraid, he told himself he had to be strong. Once, Emily heard Leo whisper to his old teddy bear, "If I'm better, Mommy Sophia won't be angry." The words left Emily standing frozen. She understood then that in this house, Leo was not being raised with love, but with fear, disguised under the name of discipline. And if no one intervened, this child would grow up believing that love always came with punishment. Emily knew she was walking on a very fragile line. On one side were Sophia's rigid rules. On the other was a child slowly withering from a lack of love. And Emily made her choice. That morning, when Sophia left the house for a spa appointment, Emily returned to Leo's room. The boy was still sitting neatly on the bed, his legs pressed tightly together, his hands resting on his thighs, as if he were already accustomed to not being allowed to make mistakes. "Leo," Emily smiled gently, "are you hungry?" Leo looked up, his eyes flickering with hope, but he immediately lowered his gaze again. I shouldn't be hungry." Emily softly sat down in front of him. "Everyone gets hungry. Being hungry isn't a mistake." She brought in a warm egg sandwich and a glass of milk. Leo stared at them, swallowing hard, but didn't dare touch them. "Can I really eat this?" he asked. "Yes, you can. I allow it." Leo ate very slowly, as if afraid that if he ate even a little faster, the miracle would disappear. When he finished, he spoke quietly. "Thank you for not being angry at me." The words made Emily choke up. From that day on, Emily quietly began bringing small things into Leo's life, things that were tiny, yet to him they were an entirely new world. She taught him how to play with toys gently, without making noise. A toy car pushed slowly across the floor, an old teddy bear that was given a name. "What's this bear's name?" Emily asked. Leo hesitated. "Toys can have names?" "They can." "Then his name is Sonny." For the first time, Leo smiled. A small smile, but one that lit up the entire room. Emily taught Leo the alphabet, without pressure, without scolding. When he wrote something wrong, she gently corrected it. When he did it right, she smiled and said, "You did very well." Leo seemed unfamiliar with such words. Every time he was praised, he looked at Emily as if to make sure. He hadn't misheard. One afternoon, as the two of them sat by the window, Leo suddenly asked, his voice very small, "Auntie Emily, do all mothers not like hugging their children?" The question left Emily frozen. She turned to him and looked deeply into his eyes. "No, Leo. Real mothers love hugging their children." Leo was silent for a long moment, then whispered, "I don't remember my real mom, but I think she would be like you." Emily reached out, hesitated for a second, then gently wrapped her arms around him. Leo stiffened at first, then slowly he wrapped his arms around her, trembling, as if touching something both unfamiliar and precious. "I like being hugged," Leo said very softly. Emily felt it clearly. This child didn't need more discipline. He needed a safe place to be himself. But Emily also knew that fragile peace would not be able to stay hidden forever. Leo's changes did not escape Sophia's notice. The boy who had once been silent and withdrawn now began to show very small signs. But they were enough to irritate her: brighter eyes, lighter steps, and sometimes a fleeting smile. Sophia didn't like that. "Leo seems to be talking more lately, doesn't he?" she asked coldly when she saw him holding a toy car. Leo flinched and immediately put the car down. "I'm sorry." Emily stood nearby, her heart tightening. Sophia turned to her. "I made it very clear that toys that cause distraction are not allowed." "Ma'am, Leo is playing very gently. He's not making any noise." Emily tried to keep her voice calm. Sophia's eyes darkened. "Are you teaching me how to raise my child?" The air grew heavy. Leo stood still, his head lowered, both hands clenched tightly. A few days later, the inevitable happened. That afternoon, when Sophia entered the room, she caught Leo smiling, truly smiling, as Emily showed him how to write his name in clumsy letters. "What are you doing?" Sophia snapped. Leo immediately jumped to his feet. "I'm sorry." Sophia stepped closer and snatched the paper from his hands. "Who gave you permission to learn this?" Emily took a step forward. "I think learning is good for the child's development." "No one asked for your opinion," Sophia said, her voice sharp as a blade. "Leo doesn't need to develop too early. He needs to learn obedience." Leo lowered his head. Tears began to fall, but he tried to hold them back. "You're crying again," Sophia shouted. "Hold out your hands." In that moment, Emily stopped thinking altogether. "No," she stepped in front of Leo. "You're not allowed to do that." The room fell into a deadly silence. Sophia froze for a second. Then her face flushed red with fury. "You've crossed the line." "He's just a child," Emily said, her voice trembling but firm. "He didn't do anything wrong." Sophia pointed toward the door. "You're fired. Immediately. Pack your things and get out of my house." Leo jerked his head up. "No." He ran over and clung tightly to Emily's leg. "Auntie Emily, don't go. I'll be good. I promise." Emily's heart shattered into pieces. She knelt down, wrapped her arms around Leo and whispered, "You didn't do anything wrong. Remember that." Sophia yanked Leo away. "That's enough." Emily walked out of the mansion with her old bag in her hand, tears blurring her vision. Behind the second-floor window, Leo stood sobbing, for the first time unable to hold his pain inside. And from that moment on, the luxurious house fell back into silence, but a silence more terrifying than ever before. Daniel Anderson realized that something was wrong, very slowly. At first, it was only small details, easy to overlook. Leo no longer ran to the door every weekend when he heard a car pulling in. He no longer chattered excitedly or clung to his father's hand like before. Instead, there was an excessive silence, eyes that always avoided contact, and a strangely cautious demeanor. "What's wrong, son?" Daniel asked during one of the rare dinners when the whole family sat together. Leo looked up at Sophia before answering. "I'm fine, Dad." The reply was short, complete, but hollow. Daniel noticed that his son had grown thinner. His clothes hung looser. Cheeks that had once been rosy were now sunken. When Daniel placed more food onto Leo's plate, Sophia immediately spoke up. "That's enough. Children eating too much isn't good." Daniel hesitated. "But he's growing." "I know what I'm doing," Sophia replied firmly. "Discipline from an early age is what makes a child proper." Daniel didn't argue. He had grown used to giving in, partly because work consumed so much of his time, and partly because he believed that Sophia, who stayed home with Leo every day, understood their son better than he did. But then there was a phone call. Daniel was at a hotel in the middle of a long business trip. He called home to talk to his son before bedtime. "Hello, Leo?" "Yes?" The boy's voice was very small, no excitement, no happiness. "What are you doing?" "I'm sitting still." "Sitting still where?" Daniel asked, unease creeping into his chest. A pause. Then Leo answered very softly, "In my room." Daniel heard Sophia's voice in the background. "Leo, speak quickly." "I'm fine, Dad," Leo said hurriedly. "Don't worry." The call ended quickly, too quickly. Daniel stared at the darkening phone screen in his hand, his heart heavy. There was something in his son's voice he couldn't ignore, fear carefully hidden. That night, Daniel couldn't sleep. He thought of Emily, the young nanny who had always been gentle, who always spoke about Leo with worry in her eyes. And then he remembered the way Sophia talked about how coddling ruins children. Had he trusted the wrong person? For the first time in many years, Daniel felt like he was standing outside his own son's life. And that thought frightened him more than any business deal ever had. He knew, if he wanted the truth, he would have to see it for himself. The decision didn't come to Daniel Anderson in a moment of impulse. It was shaped by sleepless nights, by his son's voice growing smaller, by the fear in Leo's eyes that he always tried to hide. 3 days after that call, Daniel contacted a private security company. The conversation was brief and decisive. "I want cameras installed in my house, as discreet as possible." "Sir, we only install them in common areas and the child's room, completely unnoticeable," the technician said. "All footage will be transmitted directly to your phone." Daniel was silent for a few seconds. This wasn't something he had ever imagined doing, installing cameras in his own home, watching the wife he had once trusted. But then he thought of Leo. "Do it," he said. "I need to know the truth." On the day the cameras were installed, Daniel invited Sophia out for the entire day. During that time, the security team installed cameras so small they were almost invisible, in the living room, the kitchen, the hallways, and in Leo's room as well. 2 days later, while Daniel was at the office, his phone vibrated. A notification from the camera app. He opened it. The image that appeared made his heart tighten. In the kitchen, Sophia was preparing breakfast. Leo walked in, his hair still messy, rubbing his eyes with sleepiness. "Good morning, Mom," the boy said very softly. Sophia didn't look at him. "You're late. Breakfast is at 8. Can I eat?" Leo asked, his voice trembling. Sophia placed a slice of dry bread on the table. "No milk? No fruit?" "That's all. Anyone who wakes up late doesn't deserve a proper meal." Daniel clenched his phone. "Doesn't deserve?" He kept watching. At noon, the camera in the study recorded Leo sitting at a desk writing. Mrs. Helen, the new caretaker, stood behind him, her voice strict. "Write it again. That's wrong." "My hand hurts," Leo murmured. "Your hand hurts because you're weak. Keep writing." 1 hour, then 2. Leo kept his head down, his hand trembling, but he didn't dare stop. In the afternoon, Sophia came home. "Was he well behaved?" she asked. "He cried," Mrs. Helen replied. "I put him on the punishment chair." "Good. Children who cry too much need discipline." Daniel couldn't breathe. He switched to the camera in Leo's room that evening. "I'm afraid of the dark," Leo said as Mrs. Helen turned off the light. "Can I leave the hallway light on?" "No, children aren't allowed to be weak." The door closed. The room went pitch black. The infrared camera captured Leo curling up on the bed, clutching his teddy bear tightly. "Mom," he whispered, "I'm scared." Daniel let the phone fall onto the table. There was no more doubt. No more excuses. The truth was clearer and more brutal than anything he had imagined. And inside Daniel, a new fear rose. If he didn't act immediately, his son wouldn't survive another day like this. That night, Daniel Anderson didn't take his eyes off the phone screen. It was past midnight. The city outside the hotel window lay under dim lights, but inside him, a storm was raging uncontrollably. A notification from the camera in Leo's bedroom lit up. Daniel opened the app. Leo jolted upright in bed, sweat soaking his forehead. He was breathing hard, his eyes wide open in the darkness. "No, don't come near me," Leo whispered, his voice trembling. He slid off the bed, barefoot, stepping into the hallway toward Sophia's room. The camera captured Leo knocking very softly on the door. "Mom." There was no response. Leo knocked again, a little harder. "I'm scared." The door flew open. Sophia stood there, her face tired and irritated. "What is it again?" she snapped. "I had a nightmare. Can I sleep here for a little while?" he asked. Sophia exhaled sharply, her eyes darkening. "How old are you to be acting like this?" I'm afraid of the dark." Only weak children are afraid. Sophia grabbed Leo by the arm and pulled him back into the hallway. "Go back to your room." "But, Mom—" "Quiet." The camera shook slightly as Sophia opened Leo's door and shoved him inside. She turned around and locked the door from the outside. "Mom!" Leo pounded on the door. "Please, I'm really scared." Sophia stood outside, her voice cold as ice. "If you make any more noise, you won't get breakfast tomorrow." Leo froze. He leaned his back against the door and slid down to the floor, his arms wrapped tightly around his knees. In the pitch-dark room, only the sound of suppressed sobbing remained. "Mom? My real Mom? I really miss you," Leo whispered, calling out to the mother who was no longer there. Daniel watched the scene on the screen, unable to breathe. His hands trembled. His chest felt like it was being torn apart. His son, only 4 years old, was locked in the dark, shaking with fear, begging for a mother who could not hear him. This was no longer discipline, no longer a mistake in parenting. This was destruction. Daniel jumped to his feet, knocking the chair behind him over. He immediately called his secretary. "Cancel all my meetings tomorrow." "Sir, I'm going home, right now." He looked at the screen one last time. Leo had fallen asleep on the floor, clutching his teddy bear, tears still clinging to his cheeks. Daniel whispered, his voice breaking, "I'm sorry. I'm coming." That afternoon, the doors of the Anderson mansion opened in silence. Daniel Anderson entered the house without warning. His coat still held the creases of a rushed flight, his face rigid, his eyes darkened by a determination he had never known before. Sophia was sitting in the living room, scrolling on her phone. She looked up, briefly surprised. "Daniel? Why are you home so early?" Daniel didn't answer. He walked straight up the stairs. "Leo?" he called out loudly. There was no response. Daniel rushed toward his son's room. The door was closed. He opened it, and the sight before him made his heart tighten. Leo was sitting on the punishment chair, his arms hanging limply at his sides, his head bowed. The restraints had left red marks on his tiny wrists. "Leo!" Daniel rushed forward and dropped to his knees. "Daddy's here." The boy looked up, his eyes wide in disbelief. "Dad? Really?" Daniel untied the restraints and pulled his son into his arms, holding him so tightly it was as if he feared letting go would make him disappear. He could feel how thin the child's body was, frighteningly light. Sophia stood in the doorway, her voice cold. "You're overreacting. He needs to learn his lesson." Daniel spun around. "What lesson?" "He spilled a pencil and talked back," Sophia said calmly. Daniel stood up. He took out his phone and opened the camera app. "Then what about this?" he said. The screen showed Sophia locking Leo's bedroom door in the dark night. Then the boy tied to the chair for hours. Then the meager meals, the cold scolding. Sophia's face went pale. You were spying on me?" "I was watching to protect my son," Daniel growled. "You call this teaching?" "Children have to endure hardship to be strong," Sophia argued. "You're raising a weak child." Daniel let out a bitter laugh, his eyes turning red. "No, I'm seeing a child being abused." Those words made Sophia freeze. "You're exaggerating." Daniel knelt down to Leo's level. "Did you do anything wrong?" Leo shook his head, tears falling. "I was just scared." Daniel turned to Sophia, his voice low but resolute. "You have to leave this house. Today." Sophia stepped back. "You can't." "I can," Daniel said, "and I will not let anyone hurt my son for another second." He pulled Leo tightly into his arms. For the first time in a very long while, the boy was no longer trembling. And in that house, the truth was finally called by its real name. Not discipline, but abuse. That night, Leo fell asleep in Daniel's arms. No more punishment chair, No more restraints. No more fear forced into silence. Daniel sat by his son's bed for a long time, watching the thin face sleeping peacefully, the small chest rising and falling softly. He realized how much he had missed, the days when his son had needed him the most. The next morning, when Leo woke up, the first thing he asked was, "Dad, where is Auntie Emily?" The question left Daniel silent. He had seen everything through the cameras. He understood why his son only truly smiled when Emily was near. "I'll find her," Daniel said firmly. "I promise." Daniel called the domestic staffing agency. The person in charge was quiet for a moment before saying, "Emily Carter. Since leaving your house, she hasn't taken any other job." "Please give me her address," Daniel said immediately. That same afternoon, Daniel took Leo to an old residential area tucked deep inside a narrow alley. No mansion, no tall iron gates, just a simple row of rental rooms with peeling paint on the walls. Leo held tightly to his father's hand. "Is Auntie Emily here, Dad?" "Yes," Daniel nodded. "She's here." Daniel knocked on the door of the last room at the end of the hallway. The door opened. Emily froze in place. Her face was thinner than before, dark circles under her eyes from sleepless nights. When she saw Daniel, she hadn't even had time to speak before Leo broke free from his father's hand and ran straight toward her. "Auntie Emily!" He wrapped his arms tightly around her, as if afraid that letting go again would make her disappear. Emily stood stunned for a few seconds, then knelt down and hugged him back, tears spilling uncontrollably. "Leo, are you okay?" she asked, choking back tears. "I'm okay now. My dad came back," Leo said, his voice trembling but full of hope. Daniel bowed his head to Emily. "I'm sorry for not trusting you and for letting my son suffer." Emily shook her head, tears falling. "What matters is that Leo is safe." Daniel took a deep breath. "Emily, I want to ask you to come back, not as a nanny anymore, but as the person Leo trusts the most." Emily looked down at the boy, gripping her hand tightly. For the first time in a very long while, she felt her heart being called by its true name. Emily returned to the Anderson mansion on a quiet morning. Everything was still there, the vast garden, the long hallways, the silent rooms. But the feeling was completely different. There was no longer tension hanging in the air, no invisible fear trailing a child's every step. Leo held Emily's hand tightly as he walked into the house, no longer keeping his head down. "Can I walk faster?" he asked hesitantly. Emily smiled. "You can run if you want." Leo's eyes widened, then, very slowly, he ran. Small footsteps echoed through the hallway, sounds that had once been forbidden, and no one scolded him. No one yelled. Leo stopped and turned to look at Emily, as if to be sure. "I'm not being punished?" "No," Emily replied. "You're living." In the days that followed, everything changed little by little. Emily cooked full meals for Leo. At first, he ate very slowly, constantly looking up as if waiting for someone to stop him. But when no one interrupted, he began to eat more. Color gradually returned to his cheeks. At night, Leo still woke up startled by nightmares. But now, all he had to do was call softly, "Auntie Emily." And Emily would be there, sitting by his bed, stroking his hair, until his breathing became steady again. "You can cry," she told him every time. "Crying doesn't make you weak." Daniel watched everything in silence. He saw his son smiling more, daring to speak his thoughts, daring to hug others, daring to ask questions that he had once been afraid to ask for fear of being punished for asking too much. A week later, Daniel took Leo to see Dr. Thomas Reed, a child psychologist. After the session, the doctor spoke softly to Daniel. "The boy has been through severe trauma, but the good news is he's recovering very quickly." "Why?" Daniel asked. "Because he's surrounded by something he never had before," the doctor replied. safety, and unconditional love. That afternoon, Leo ran through the garden, laughing out loud. Emily stood watching, tears quietly falling, not from pain anymore, but because at last that child was living the childhood he was meant to have. Time began to pass more gently from the day Emily returned. Mornings in the mansion no longer began with heavy silence, but with small footsteps running down the hallways, laughter ringing from the kitchen, and the smell of freshly baked bread filling the air. Daniel gradually changed. He reduced his workload, came home earlier, and spent more time playing with his son. For the first time, he learned to sit down at Leo's eye level, listening as the boy talked about very small things. An ant in the garden, a new letter he had learned, or a dream that was no longer frightening. And in those very ordinary moments, Daniel realized that what he had once lacked was not a perfect wife, but someone who loved his son with her whole heart. Emily never tried to take anyone's place. She was simply there, when Leo needed her, when Daniel needed her, when the house needed real warmth. One afternoon, while Leo was playing in the garden, Daniel stood beside Emily, his voice growing low. "I've thought a lot," he said, "about family and about you." Emily remained silent. "I don't want Leo to just be cared for," Daniel continued. "I want him to be loved, forever." Daniel knelt down in front of Emily, holding a simple ring in his hand. "Emily Carter, will you marry me and become Leo's mother?" Leo ran over and wrapped his arms around Emily's legs. "Will you stay with me, forever?" Emily's tears fell, warm and heavy. "Yes," she whispered, "I'll stay." Leo beamed, throwing his arms around both of them. "Then I have a family." And for the first time in his life, Leo Anderson no longer had to wonder whether he was loved. Many years later, Leo Anderson was no longer the boy who always walked with his head down in fear. He grew into a confident young boy with bright eyes, an open smile, and arms always ready to embrace the people he loved. In that house, laughter had completely replaced the silence that once haunted it. One afternoon, as the whole family sat in the garden, Leo suddenly asked, "Mom Emily, was I very sad back then?" Emily paused, then smiled gently. "Yes, but you were very strong." Leo thought for a moment, then said, "I don't remember it very clearly anymore. It's like a bad dream that's already passed." Daniel looked at his son, his throat tight. He knew that wasn't forgetting. It was complete healing. Leo ran over and hugged Emily. "I like now better, because now I know I'm loved." Emily hugged him tightly. "You were always worthy of love, from the very beginning." In that moment, Daniel understood something he had learned far too late. Children don't need to grow up in fear to become strong. They need love to be themselves. Leo's story began with pain, but it didn't end there. It ended with the right choice, with an adult brave enough to face the truth, and with love strong enough to save a child. Because in the end, a real family is not a place without mistakes, but a place where there is always love to heal every wound.